In this class, I'll be giving you an introduction to Spring Framework, and I'll be covering one concept of Spring, that's dependency injection. And I'll also show you what the Spring Framework course offered by Edureka covers. So let's start with the introduction to Spring Framework. So before we start, my name is Ashrit. I'm one of the co-founders of feetapart.com. I have around 8 to 10 years of experience with Java and related technologies. I have used many frameworks, including Spring, so that should be sufficient for introduction. So we'll be covering introduction to Spring, so we'll understand why do we need a Spring framework and its features. And I try to cover as much of dependency injections as possible. So let's see an illustration and try to understand why do we need a Spring framework. So here you can see that there's a management of an ABC Private Limited has decided to make web applications for their customers. So the management calls for the web development team led by James. So James is leading a web development team, and they have decided to make a web application for their customers. And in the meeting, they say that it's an urgent requirement, so I called you here. So one of our customers needs to build an application for them, and we have very less time, and the customer wants the application to be up and running before Christmas. So they want it to be developed as soon as possible, and they'll go about that discussion. And I've seen in our previous project there were a lot of codes that we did not do anything, so we want something fast and efficient. So he meant to say that there were a lot of code which we might not have written if we had used a better technology. So one of them will suggest that we can use Spring Framework. So can any one of you suggest what exactly is a framework? Okay, so have you used any framework? So let's make it a bit interactive so that it will not be boring. So can you tell us more about the Spring Framework and how it matches our requirement? So the Spring is a well-established framework with a lot of features that helps the developer to develop on their applications rather than worrying about a non-functional code. So what do we mean by non-functional code? It increases developer productivity and reduces the application development time, and all of them are happy and they'll go about implementing it using Spring Framework. So what exactly is a framework? So let me try to use Paint and try to illustrate it. So let's suppose that you're trying to build a web application, and what are you trying to build? You're trying to build something very similar to Facebook. So you're trying to build a social network. So let's assume that this is the core web app. So pardon me for my bad handwriting. So it is written in PHP. So okay, so Facebook is written in PHP. So right now we are not talking about how Facebook is implemented. So let's assume that what are all the functionalities of Facebook. So the Facebook has a core web applications, and it is a web server, and they have something called as maybe a behavioral analysis. They might be having some other web services like maybe a recommendation service. So the entire architecture will be a kind of a service oriented architecture. So there will be multiple services talking to each other. So while building such kind of a complex web application, so how does a framework help? So let's suppose that you have decided to use the Java servlet and JSPs to build it, and you have decided that you will not use any frameworks. I'll start by scratch by building it through servlet and JSP. So what are the disadvantages of this approach? So the disadvantage of this approach is that you have to develop each and every functionalities of this web application. Whereas if you use a framework like Spring, so let's assume that this is a Spring framework. So Spring framework has a built-in security mechanism. and it has adapters. So when I say adapters, like a conversion adapters like XML to JSON to objects. So when I say objects, these are plain POJOs, the plain old Java objects. And there are many supports, like you can do social network integration and you can integrate with other social networks. Like you can integrate with LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. All those supports are already provided in Spring. So if you want to develop a web application and you need not to worry about implementing security features for your web application, so that's already built in with Spring. You can use that feature and you need not worry about this data conversions. So, or else you need to worry about how to convert from data from one format to another format. Spring provides all those facilities, as well as if you want to connect to any other social network, it's very easy using Spring, and there are many other features available in Spring. So in short, a Spring framework is a framework, or any framework is a software which has already some of the features built in which your applications can use, so that your application can concentrate only on writing the core business logic. So the application can only worry about writing the core business logic. So other things will be handled by the framework itself. So that's why we always go for a framework. So any questions on this? So it was created by Rod Johnson, started the Spring Source company, and the Spring framework is an open source application framework and inversion of a control container for Java platform. It provides comprehensive infrastructure for developing Java applications. So if at all you have used any framework, so you might be knowing that using framework will simplify the development of applications. The Spring handles infrastructure so that you can focus on your application. So I've covered this last point to that illustration. So Spring is a framework like Struts and Hibernate. So most of you might have used this framework called as Hibernate. It's an ORM framework. So it's famous in the industries. The learner should focus on learning more of a Spring compared to other technologies now. The Spring and Hibernate are extremely popular and widely used in industries. Yes, you can say that, yeah, Spring and Hibernate are widely used, but uh, in the first sentence, what we say, the learner should focus on learning more of a Spring compared to other technologies, is a bit biased towards Spring. There are other frameworks and there are other programming languages which are doing equally well. Like there are so many frameworks in Python which are equally suitable for building web applications. And definitely, Spring framework is one of the best frameworks available for building Java-based applications. Spring is a lightweight framework and it does not involve any installation, and starting and stopping activities associated with the container is quite very easy. So in Java technology, there are so many frameworks that help programmers to build complex applications easily. It's very difficult to find an application which does not use any frameworks. These days, every application uses one or the other frameworks. The frameworks bring in a kind of a structure to your project, as well as it reduces a lot of complexity from the developer from developing each and every component. So some of the frameworks, famous frameworks are this Hibernate, and most of you must have used Log4j for logging. And JUnit is a framework for testing. So there are many frameworks available in Java. Okay, so moving on. So the Spring framework provides a lightweight solution to develop maintainable and reusable enterprise applications. So a few other examples of frameworks are Hibernate, Log4j, JSF, Struts. So now, can we define what is a framework? Can anyone of you define what is a framework? Okay, the class is very silent. Set of rules which simplifies. No, it's not a set of rules. So if you want set of rules, you have to use some other framework like rules. So this is not a rule engine which simplifies our work. So how does it simplify our work? So framework is a set of reusable software programs that forms the basis for an application. So if you take this, so security is an important aspect of an application. So this message adapters are an important part of an application. So social connect is an important part of each and every web applications developed in the recent years. So the important parts of the web applications are already developed in Spring, and you can clearly reuse it in your applications. So you need not develop this security feature. You need not learn about the bcrypt algorithm to store the user's password. So it's already there in Spring. Reduces boilerplate code. I would not agree with that, because Spring introduces its own way of boilerplating. So one of the complaints for Spring framework is that it's reliance on XML. So there are a lot of XMLs in Spring project. It has been reduced by annotations, but still Spring has a lot of dependencies on XMLs. And the reduction in the boilerplate code which it does based on this using this XML, I would say writing XML itself is a kind of a boilerplating. So there are other frameworks like Play framework which are catching up with Spring. The only weakness which Spring has is that a lot of XMLs can confuse Java developers sometimes. What is wrong with XML and why should we prefer annotation? So when I show you an example of XML, I'll let you know why exactly it is a bit cumbersome to write an XML, and the mapping from the XML to a Java code, it's not very intuitive. So what do you mean by a lightweight container? A Spring framework can be described as a lightweight container as it does not involve installation, configuration, start and stop activities associated with the container. So uh, I'll show you how you can use Spring framework. So I'll show you a live example of how to install Spring framework on your IDE and create a sample Spring application. With XML, we can have a different XMLs for each environment. We have a question from Srinath. With XML, we can have a different XMLs for each environment, like development, staging, QA, production. But the annotations is difficult to achieve this. What's your thought? I would not agree with this. So you can achieve this through annotations too. So you can have the configurations related to each and every environment in your properties file, which can be loaded. So when I say about XML, I'm not talking about the project configurations. I'm talking about creating the objects using XML. So Spring uses creation of object using XML. So I think I'll explain it in detail when I talk about dependency injection, where you will configure the object and its proper attributes in an XML, and it will be injected into the project. So I don't have any problem in storing configuration related parameters in an XML or an external file, but storing an object attribute in an XML is counterintuitive for me. And it's for anyone else too. You can just go and search about Spring framework and its reliance on XML. So there are many people who gets confused. So if you get used to it, it takes some time to get used to it, but once you get used to it, you can reap the benefits of this framework. So how Spring framework is different from other frameworks? We can use develop EJB applications using Spring, so you can develop it. The Spring has its own advantages from other frameworks. So when you say other framework, if you can give me an example, I can do a comparatively. I can tell you how is it better. So if you say that raw, if you're using the raw servlets and JSPs, I've told you that you have to implement all these features by on your own, like security, the adapters, the social connects, and other features provided by the Spring framework. Like Hibernate. So Hibernate is not a framework which you can compare with Spring. So Hibernate is an ORM framework, whereas Spring is a Java application and web application development framework. So this is not a right comparison. Okay, so the difference between the Spring and the struts. So there are a lot of difference between the Spring and struts. Spring provides many more features than struts. For example, the loosely coupling of your object, you can achieve loose coupling better in Spring than in struts. And struts does a few things better. That's why the Spring gives a provision of integrating struts application inside Spring. So this will be a bit difficult for me to explain in the interest of time. So I would say struts has its own advantages, whereas a Spring has its own advantages too. So one of the advantages where Spring scores over struts is its loose coupling mechanism. So that's what I'll be talking about, dependency injection. So loose coupling through dependency injections. Okay, so okay, so let me show you how to configure it. I'm sure that most of you must be familiar with Java programming language, and if you're familiar with Java programming language, you must be familiar with Eclipse IDE. So you can install a Spring plugin and make your Eclipse IDE much more comfortable to develop Spring applications. So let's see how to do that. So you have to go click on help, and then you have to go to Eclipse Marketplace. And once it downloads all the packages, we should be able to search for Spring. So let's wait for a while. It will. So you have to install the Spring IDE 3.6.4 release. So I've already installed it. So those of you who have not installed it, you can install this. So your Eclipse IDE will become more comfortable for developing the Spring application. So once this is done, so you will be able to create Spring applications. I've already created the Spring applications here. So I'll try to demonstrate few of them. So once we cover few of the theory part, I'll try to cover few of the programs. Spring simplifies Java development to back up its attack on Java complexities. Spring employs four key strategies: lightweight and minimally invasive development with plain old Java object, loose coupling through dependency injections, and interface orientation. So this is where a Spring scores over other framework. Declarative programming through aspect and common conventions. This is also an important feature. Aspect oriented programming is an important feature of Spring framework. Boilerplate reduction through aspect and templates, I partly agree with it, because uh, the less number of boilerplate coding in Java, the more XMLs is generated. So is Spring Source tool is not better than Eclipse. So Spring Source tool is also built on top of Eclipse. I'm making my existing Eclipse compatible with Spring, or else you can download the Spring Source tool too. So that's fine. Okay. So aspect, we have seen inversion of control that is done through dependency injection. This is what I'll be covering in this class. Aspect, another important aspect is this aspect oriented programming, which enables cross-cutting the concerns. The security feature which I spoke about in that illustration, it cross-cuts the entire project. So that is where we use aspect oriented programming. And there is a lot of support for data access, like working with JDBC and Hibernate. Spring has a concrete support for interacting with databases either through your raw JDBC or through Hibernate. So with JDBC, the Spring implements JDBC templates. You can use JDBC templates to talk to your databases, or a Spring has Hibernate template too, so which you can use to talk to your database in an ORM way. Model view controller is another important aspect. So most of the Spring applications are Spring Web applications, and Spring provides MVC supports through servlets and struts, and this is a web framework. And another thing I would like to say here is that the Spring has a good support for REST. So the Jersey library is built in Spring framework. There is a lot of support for integrating Jersey to your Spring project. So those of you who have built REST application, I'm sure that you must be knowing about Jersey library. Okay. So I'll skip few things. So this is how a Spring Framework's architecture looks like. There is a support for testing. You can integrate with JUnit, and then there is a core container. This is the Spring core, which consists of beans, core, context, and expression language. And then there is support for aspect-oriented programming. And this is where you have all the support related to your database connections, transactions, ORMs, etc. And this is the support for your MVC for building your web applications. I have a question from Ashu. So yes, Ashu, go ahead. I'm muted by the organization. Okay, I'll unmute you. So give me a second. Yes, you can speak now.
Hello. Am I audible? Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me, Ashu?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, tell me.
So I have seen some Spring.io website also to download Spring for like different kind of purpose, like for messaging queue or some non-relational database. But you are saying it's better to use Spring through Eclipse plugin. Hello.
Yeah. So no, I'm not saying that you have to use Spring to accept Eclipse. So usually what happens is that we'll be having an IDE like Eclipse. We will be using Eclipse IDE. You can use that existing IDE itself and develop Spring application by just installing this plugin.
So I'm saying, but in the beginning you told that Spring Source is not good. So I'm just for this purpose I asked, better to go through
If
that
I remember properly, I've I've never told that the Spring Source is not good. I told that you can either use the Spring Source tool or you can use Eclipse, existing Eclipse. So this both are one and the same.
Okay.
Okay. Fine.
Okay.
Okay. So I hope
But
any other questions?
it's for non-relational and all.
Okay. Thank you. So we have another interesting question. So why are you in a hurry? A person who is newbie will not understand at this pace. So I have to cover introduction to Spring. Along with that, I have to demonstrate an example of Spring in 1 hour. So I hope you understand my challenges which I'll be going through. So I think the recordings will be made available to you so you can listen to it as many times as possible so that you will get an understanding of what I'm trying to say here. So few of you might be having a little bit of idea about what Spring Framework is. So I cannot cover this introduction to Spring Framework in detail because many of you would like to see that how the other important topics in Spring will be covered. So I'm trying to do justice to both the beginners as well as to those who have a slight idea about Spring Framework. So you can join the class, and then I'll go in. There are 78 slides, and this 78 slides will be covered in 3 hours. And I'll go in complete detail, and I'll try to explain each and every component in detail. So quickly, we'll try to execute for one or two Java programs, and we'll see how Spring helps. So the object coupling problem. So here, not possible to incorporate the changes without refactoring the code. The requirement is that without refactoring the code, can you change the object? So it cannot be scalable or testable in isolation or even maintainable without some degree of code change. We'll see this in detail. At least we'll spend a good 20 minutes on the dependency injection so that you can at least say that I understood what exactly is a dependency injection in Spring Framework. Okay. So a dependency injection is also called as inversion of control container. So the objects created by containers are also called as managed objects or beans. We'll see how to create a bean. The container can be configured by loading XML files or detecting specific Java annotations on configuration classes. We'll be using XMLs, and I'll show you how to use XML to configure a bean and how to inject that bean into your project. So central to Spring Framework is its inversion of control container. So inversion of control container is one of the main pillars of Spring Framework, which provides a consistent means of configuring and managing Java objects. So all the Java objects where you want loose coupling will be injected into the project. So what do you mean by loose coupling? So now let's assume that you have a Java application, and let's say that you have an object called car, and then you have an object like user. So this example is purely for illustration, so it's not a real world example. So now let's assume that this value of this car object will be changing frequently. So it will be changed very frequently. So what happens if the car object changes very frequently? So you have to make some changes in this car in the code where you are trying to create this car object. So basically what I'm trying to say is that, so how do you create a car object? You say that car is equal to new car, and then you will set all the properties either through the constructors or through the setter methods. You set all the properties related to this car. So what happens if you want to change some of the properties of this car? You have to change this code. So you have to change. So this is called as refactoring of code. So you cannot avoid this refactoring of the code because you have tightly coupled this car object to this Java application. So this is called tight coupling. So then what exactly is loose coupling? So if at all this entire car object was configured and its properties file can be, its attributes can be stored in some XML file or properties file, just by changing those properties, you can create a car object out of it. So you need not change any part of your code. Only by changing the configurations, you will get a new car object in your Java applications. So this is called as loose coupling. So Spring achieves this loose coupling through a concept called as dependency injection. So this dependency of this object is being injected into this application, so which is nothing but your Java application, and the new keyword will not be used. So any questions on tight coupling and loose coupling? So, okay, thank you. So now let's see how exactly Spring accomplishes this loose coupling. So we don't create a car object in loose coupling. So Summer has a question. So we do create a car object, but it's in a different way. So I'll just demonstrate that how it is different. So let's go to the examples part and see how to do that. So you can see that there are two classes here. There is a user class which has a car in it. So there is a has a relationship. User has a car in it, and then there are getter and setter methods for this car. So there is public void set car to set the value of car, and then there is public car get car, and then we have this car object which has two attributes in it. One is the name attribute and there is the per day cost. So per day cost to rent this car. And then there are getters and setter methods for these attributes, name and per day cost. Okay, so now in Spring, all the dependencies which you are trying to inject into the application, those attributes has to be stored in an XML file, which we usually call it as a context.xml file. So for each, you can have as many context files as possible. So it depends upon your structuring. So you can have a context file for each and every object if you want. So this is how an XML will look like. So in the first instance, you will get scared of this XML, but I would like to tell you that this bean and this everything will be generated by your Eclipse IDE itself. The only part which you have to bother about is this part. So how do we create a bean? So you create a bean by using this bean tag with an ID. So you can give any value for this ID. So here he has given the ID as user and the class which it corresponds to. Right now, the class which it corresponds to is this co.edureka.user. So I'm assuming that all of you must be knowing about Java and at least the core Java. So this bean has an ID and you can give any name for this ID and then the class which it corresponds to. So this should be a fully qualified class name. And what does it consist of? It consists of a property. This property refers to the attributes. It consists of only one attribute, that is car, and here I say that the name is equal to car. It should be exactly same as this name whatever we have given here, and it is saying that it is referenced by this car bean. So where exactly have we defined this car bean? So you can see it below. Here itself we have defined this car bean, and then we have this bean with ID equal to car, and which class it corresponds to. This is co.edureka.car. And now let's see what does this car consist of. The car consists of a name and a per day cost. So here you can see that the property name is equal to name, and then the value, we are directly providing the value here. We are not referencing any other object here. So we just say value is Renault Duster. And the second property name is the per day cost and the value is 10,000. So this is how you create an object in an XML file, and this object will be injected into your Spring application. So are you using Spring 4 but the context.xml has a Spring 3.0 Xserve in it? So right now when these slides were made, these were made for Spring 3, but when I create XML files, I'll create it based on 4.0 XSDs. Okay. So in the test class, you can see that first we are loading the context. So application context equal to new class path XML application context. So there are many application contexts available, like there is a file system XML application context. Using a context, you can get the objects which are created in XML. So we have created user and car objects in XML. So these objects can be got through the context. So how will we get it? So here you can see user, and he has named it as object context.getBean. Here you have to give the name what you have given for this ID. So you can see that we have not used the new operator here, but we have got this user object. And if you want to change anything in this user object, you can simply change in this XML and it will be reflected in your program. So let's try to see if I have this example already coded or not. So okay, so I have this car class which has name and per day cost, and it has this get name, get per day cost, and set per day cost. So when does the bean objects get created? When we load the context in the test class or when we write the code in XML? Uh, when you write the code in XML, the bean object will not be created. When you run the program, then it will be created. So I'll show you that example. So, and then we have this user object. It has a private car in it, and there are getter methods and setter methods. So is this clear, guys? So there are two Java classes. One is the car class, which has name and per day cost, and then there is this user class which has this car object. Okay, so now we need to see the XML file. So there are many XML files I've written, so now it will be difficult for me to choose which XML file I might have used. Okay, so it's good that I'm not able to find it. So to create a Spring XML file, you right click on your project, go to new, and then you choose this file called a Spring Bean configuration file. So click on this file and then give a name for this. So I'll say so dependency injection basics. So you can give any name for this XML file, and then it will ask so which all XSD namespaces you want. So I'll say that I want this beans, and I'll choose this 4.1 XSD, this is the latest one, and I want context. And what else do I need? So I need beans and context. So that should do it, and then I'll click on finish. So you can see that these XML files are automatically generated by Eclipse. So I did not write these namespaces and these XSDs. So what I need to write is just the bean. So I'll just say property, sorry, not property, it is bean ID is equal to car and class is the fully qualified class name of car, so which is co.edureka.car. So IntelliSense works here too, and then we have to set the properties. So property, let me refer to it, name is name and value is and then you can set a value to it. So one attribute we have set. So another property is per day cost, value is 10,000. And then I'll create another bean, that is a user bean. Class is co.edureka.user, and it has only one property. So that is property name is car, which is referenced by this car. So this car, whatever I've written here, is nothing but this ID. It should be same as this one. So that's all about this XML file. So now we can write a test method. I'll just call it as main1. So I'll write a new main method. And I'll be using the file system application context. And this file name should be the file which we have created just now. So that is di basics.xml, and then I can get the user object now. User is equal to, you need to do typecasting, and from the context you can get the user. You have to call get bean, and whatever you have given the ID parameter in this di basic, it's better to copy this and paste it here. So now you have got this user object. Once you have the user object, you can print this. So once you have this user object, we can print this car details. So this is from once you got this user object, then onwards it's straightforward. You can just say user.getCar.getName, and the per day cost is user.getCar.per-day-cost. So now let's try to run this and see if there are any problems in this. So you can just click on this run test car. So you can see that we have got the car name, which is Renault Duster, and the per day cost, which is 10,000, which has been configured in this XML. So what have we done here? So we have created a loose coupling from this through this dependency injection approach of Spring Framework. So the car object has been, the properties of the car objects has been defined in this bean tag, and all the properties are set. So now for the beauty of this is that in future you will say that okay, the requirement has changed, and the car should not be your Renault Duster, it should be some other some other car. So now how will you handle this if it is some other car? So you can just say that you can say that it is BMW car, and class is equal to co dot Edureka dot car, and then you can have these two properties. I'll just copy this, and instead of Renault Duster you can say BMW, and you can see the per day cost is 30,000. And here instead of referring to this car, I can now refer to this BMW car. So now you can see that the user class will be having a different car object itself, but I have not even changed a single line of Java code. So everything has been changed in this XML only. So now if I run this car example, so you can see that it says the car name is BMW and the per day cost is 3,000. So this is how you can achieve loose coupling in the Spring framework. So I hope this is clear. Okay, so we have around 4 more minutes left in this webinar. So I would like to take few questions. So this is also called as a setter-based dependency injection. How many ways we can get application context? So there are many ways in which you can get application context. The most common way is using a class path application context. Why should we typecast user to in user object? So if you don't typecast, then this context.getBean will return an object. It will return of the type object. So we know that what kind of object it is. So then you have to typecast it. So any other questions? And what is the difference between the file and the class path? So the file system XML application context will look at that file from relative to your application where you have created. For example, this file app context.xml or this di basics.xml is available in this folder itself, hello Spring. Whereas the class path XML application context will try to find this XML file in the class path. So at that time you have to put it in the source/main/resources. Whatever you put it in the resources will be available through class path application context. So the better way to use is through a class path XML application context. So I have just used file system XML application context. So any other question? Okay. Bean factory or application context, which is better? So application context is also a kind of a bean factory itself. So can we define null values? You can define null values. There are ways. So one of the slides covers it. So I'm not very clear about it. One of the slides covers about how to define null values. Okay, so we have come to the end of this webinar. I hope you got a bit of introduction to Spring Framework. It's very difficult to do a justice to such a broad concept like Spring Framework uh, in 1 hour. So I think I did my best to cover one of the most important widely used concept in Spring Framework, that is dependency injection. At least you came to know that we don't use new operators when you want loose coupling, and we try to get all the attributes of an object from an XML file. So can you please explain the last line? So last line as in this system.out.println. That is just printing the car, it's just getting the car object from the user object, and it's printing the name and the per day cost. Yeah, get car dot get name will get the class car object, and from the car object you will get the name, and user dot get car will get the car object, and from that car object you are getting the per day cost. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this webinar. So thanks for joining. Have a nice day. Bye bye.